A zenedoboz a legkegyetlenebb tárgy a filmben, és ehhez kapcsolódik a legdrámai pillanat. Az ön életében volt ilyen végső bizonyíték, vagy ez egy fikció, hogy ilyen van?
I didn't understand it.
I can translate it.
Well, I can do it.
Okay.
In your life, well, go ahead. Actually,
Okay.
you're asking the question.
Thanks. So, music box is actually a very cruel and, for me, a bit perv object in the film. In your life, there were final evidence in your own discovering.
You mean in my personal discovery?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the
Was
question.
there
I got it. I'm teasing you. I tease you. Yes, what happened in my case was that the Justice Department of the Office of Special Investigations put on this case in these hearings, and they had done a very expensive investigation, and they had the actual writings, right? And so it was like one after another. Beginning with a book that my father published called Nemzet Politika in the 30s that we didn't have a copy of. They actually translated that whole book, right, and found it. And then there were other writings in much smaller publications. So there was like a series of billy clubs to the head, you know, over a period of time, because they had it. First they did the charge, did you? And he'd say no. I didn't, you know, and they said, are you sure? And then he said, yes. So then they had it, they put it on top of the table, and we all read it. And he said, well, I didn't remember. I just didn't remember, you know. So, but that happened 20 times. You know, one of the things that I think hurt me the most was on a very personal writerly level was that there had been a series of book burnings in Hungary in the 30s and 40s. And all the books written by Jewish authors especially, but anti-government authors, were burned, publicly burned in these big bonfire burnings. And he was accused of being very involved as one of the organizers of these burnings in his role with the propaganda ministry. And he denied it absolutely. And they had the internal memos, you know, that were signed by him, signing people to the book burnings and all that kind of stuff. I think one of the, you know, life has these unbelievable bitter ironies sometimes, but my father was a lifelong anti-communist, and he hated the communist system with great justification. I agreed with his hatred of the communist system. And countries like Hungary know that the best. But ironically, when the Soviet Empire fell, and when the communists left Hungary, all of this evidence was turned over, you know, to the OSI. All of these archives were opened with the cooperation of the United States, and it was really that stuff that brought all of that down, you know. And once again, the irony there is cruel. You know? And I did understand your question very clearly the second time.
Okay, so you were talking about changing the title of the movie and even changing the ending of the movie. These are very serious artistic questions.
Yes.
So who makes the decision? You don't seem to be a simple or an easy guy who could just give up the ending, the original ending of the story. So how does it go?
Well, it was indeed not simple. I really respect Costa Gavras as an artist. He's done some incredible movies. He's a very gutsy man. He's also a very humane man, very smart man. And we had a very lengthy discussion about the nature of the Jessica Lange character. And of course that discussion moved on to how do we survive when we find the evidence of overwhelming evil among the people that we love? You know, and especially how do we survive that if it comes from a person, you know, who's been our greatest ally through the course of our lives, and who clearly has helped you become the kind of person you are. And then you discover that a lot of things are possible. You may have been a pawn in that game. You know, you may have misjudged someone for forever. And the point that Costa made, and it's the point that I just tried to make earlier, where I think he was absolutely right, is he said that we don't, with personal resolve and with will and with strength and with the loving support of others, we can survive the worst kind of damage that could be done to us. I would add into the equation at this point in my life, with God's help, we can get over those kinds of things. And where I think he was right, proven right, I suspected he was right when I rewrote that ending, so her life doesn't come to a stop. She keeps living. She's been badly damaged, but she keeps living. And I think, ironically, you know, another case of the same bitter irony that I just mentioned, I survived the same process, ultimately. So, you know, but this stuff gets very, very twisted, because then the author of this particular story about a woman who isn't destroyed, who somehow survives, the same thing happens to the author who wrote the story, you know, and you start putting these things into a sort of cosmic and metaphysical significance, and it's the kind of stuff that you can ponder forever if it happens to you, you know.
Well, let me just fill that out, that movies are a collaborative effort. And I think there are inputs that you take and there are inputs that you dismiss. But you clearly listen to the reason of why the director or the producer is suggesting certain things, because they really have a point of view about what that's going to do to the movie.
Right.
And I think you can't just be locked in a room by yourself. Maybe you're a genius and you can do it all, and Joe was a genius on Ellen Houston or on Basic Instinct, because there was nothing that needed to be done to that script. But there are often screenplays that need the collaboration of directors and producers in order to bring them to life. Not to mention the distributor, who's the final decision maker, because he's the one that's putting it out there, and it's going to be, and it's an interesting thing, because it's an art, but it's an art that becomes a business at a certain point. And this is something that we have a lot of trouble with here in Hungary, recognizing that the art is to make the business work somehow. That's the real art of this industry, is that what you have to say, you can present it in such a way that the audiences can accept it and people believe it, and they're willing to pay money for it. Because up until then, you're just in a room creating something that you think is wonderful. But the ultimate test is whether other people want to see it.
Also, I mentioned this yesterday, and once again, I don't want to repeat myself, but it's communication. If you can communicate with millions of people, you know, and the key to that is to make it entertaining, because otherwise, if you're beating people over the head with something, with a message, or with your own personal message, people don't like being beaten over the head. But if you make it entertaining, you know, then to make it entertaining, you have to communicate. So, which also says you have to make it commercial enough so that people will want to see it. It's entertaining; they'll want to see it. On the first part of the question, I truly do not view myself as a genius. I view myself as a Hungarian refugee trying to make his way in the big world. You know, it's not easy sometimes.
Itt volt egy kérdés, aztán mindjárt oda megyünk.
Egyetértek azzal, hogy van olyan szereplő a filmben, akit én is lecseréltem volna, hogyha élettem volna a rendező. De van egy jelenet, amiben semmiképpen sem lehetett volna jobb színészt találni arra a feladatra. Ez a különös jelenet, ez a kulcs jelenet, ez különösen megérintett engem, és ez pedig Törőcsik Mari. És hihetetlen érzés volt és jó érzés látni azt megint egy ilyen nagy produkcióban, hogy nekünk magyaroknak milyen értékeink vannak. Egy olyan színésznő, mint a Törőcsik Mari. Ez kinek volt kit lehet érte dicsérni, hogy Törőcsik Mari erre az epizód szerepre, de erre a kulcsfontosságú szerepre, amit hiszem zseniálisan. Nála azt hiszem senki jobban a világon ezt nem tudta volna megoldani, ezt az apró, de fontos szerepet.
Szerintem a javaslat tulajdonképpen a Péteréktől és egy magyar casting grouptól jött, amit én javasoltam a Krosztának, amikor átnéztem a magyar szereplőket, de végül is ő választotta.
I really had nothing to do with the casting on the movie, except for meeting Jesse, who I thought would be terrific, and meeting Armand Mueller-Stahl at my house, who I liked very much on a personal level. I realized that he didn't seem to have the kind of explosive and primal kind of power that I saw in him, but that I saw in the character. But I respected him so much as an actor that I thought he could do that, right? So
It was very funny because I think I was at that meeting.
were you at my house? When
Yes,
was that?
we were, and Armand was over,
Yeah.
and he was totally different.
Yeah.
He was a very likable,
Yes,
positive character, and
with great warmth.
yeah,
at
with
that day.
with a lot of warmth. And unfortunately, that for me didn't come across in
Yeah,
the film.
yeah, it didn't to me either, but that's how he was at the house. I remember that.
Next,
Yes. The movie would have worked fine
Where is he?
without the music box itself. It's a drama. I don't want to go over what makes the movie work and what makes the movie great. It's a great gimmick, the music box itself. At what point in your creative process did you come up with the music box
It
itself?
was in the first draft. It was there right away. I've always loved music boxes, and that's part of it. I think they're have great charm, and it's like it's coming from a bygone world, very romantic. And the notion that you find this kind of horror show in this romantic box, I thought that the irony would be very powerful.
So you thought that a key moment in the film should be somehow tied in with this object.
Tied in with this object that's a very romantic object. And inside this romantic object is an absolute horror show. And it's that juxtaposition of the two things that I thought would be very interesting for the drama.
All right. Could you also?
I don't think an ice pick would have worked in that.
Not in that movie. Now, this young lady pointed out to me that we see another music box in the apartment or in the home of the father-in-law.
Yes.
Can you enlighten us a little bit about the significance of this thing, the symbolic meaning of a second music box that
Right.
turns up first?
I'd much rather you enlighten me about the symbolic significance.
Well,
of
not
the
symbolic,
music
okay,
box,
but
right?
there must have been some intention of putting a music box way before, an hour before we actually see the music box from the pawn shop.
Well, because and this is my opinion, you know, if you have a romantic object and you set it up, people relate to that as a romantic object. They see it, and a music box really is. At least to me it is. You know, it might be my Chaka Doros little roots, but I like music box, right? And then honestly, there's a music box that contains, you know, absolute abhorrent evil. You know, the combination of those two things I think is very intriguing. You know, if you want me to be more specific with its Jungian and Freudian messages, I won't do
That's not
that.
what I meant.
Következő.
Right behind you.
Going back to the characters, I found the witnesses in the courtroom scene very, very credible, the
Yes.
Hungarian witnesses.
Yes.
And I didn't recognize any Hungarian actors or actresses. Perhaps Peter knows the answer. Well,
Eva Sireni was in
That was shot in Chicago,
And,
and we picked people from there.
Oh, I see. Because they were like genuine, real people, and I had the
They were Hungarian, so.
and they acted so naturally
Yeah, but they weren't actors,
that they weren't actors, and that this was, I think this worked extremely well. That even as a director, I couldn't tell, you know, they didn't seem to be acting; they seemed to be telling their own story. So that was very, I think that added to the credibility of their statements. And the second question I have really is to Andy, and to you as well, Joe. You make a great movie, and it's a strong, powerful movie. At the end of the day, the distributors do not believe in it, they do not promote it, and it's a failure. It must be really heartbreaking. So, you know, to put so much effort, money, and talent into a film, and if it's not promoted correctly, then still it doesn't get to the people that you're intending it to. How do you feel about that?
Well, we get very disappointed, frustrated, upset. We yell at the distribution company day and night, but ultimately it's a way of life. We, just like in the story, we have to go on and do the next thing. Luckily, you know, and there are other platforms today, video, DVD, television, the computer world that's coming to play, that people get to see your product ultimately at the end of the day. I think if it's a word of mouth that continues to grow. If you like the movie, you'll tell your friends about it, and that's really all we can hope is that we do reach that kind of an audience. It reaches an audience sooner or later, but we just have to go on and do the next one.
I was heartbroken when Sobotchak Serelem, The Children of Glory, didn't get an American distributor. I loved the movie, and I thought it really said something. And we couldn't get an American distributor for it. And Andy killed himself to do that, to try to get one. And for whatever reason, the biggest reason in my mind being that it's about a Hungarian subject matter, it's about a Hungarian revolution, it's about Hungarian people. And if you look at what's being distributed today, you know, it's mostly roller coaster rides and amusement park movies that even teenage kids have issues with in terms of how smart they are, let alone anything with the historical nature and complexity of Sobotchak Serelem. You know, but I found that particularly heartbreaking because I thought it was a terrific movie. I thought the young woman who directed it, who was here yesterday, did a really terrific job. But you know what? I mean, ultimately, we're proud of having done that, as we are proud of having done Music Box, and people will see it, especially in more media today, right? Because of what you just mentioned.
It's a very interesting thing you mentioned to me, and Quentin Tarantino was very much involved in the documentary that was the basis for that movie. You know, sees it almost on a monthly basis and declares it as the best unreleased movie of the decade.
Yeah.
So, and he's a pretty good writer, a pretty good judge of
I was
what goes
doing
on.
an interview, and the reporter told me about it. I'd never seen the quote, but I was very impressed with the quote. Yeah.
Sometimes that happens, and we
Yeah.
go on. Sometimes those things work that you think, well, ultimately you don't think it's what you intended to do, but it turns, you finish it, you put it out there, it works great. So it happens both ways.
Sometimes the flip side happens too. I mean, in my experience, the Flashdance was ready, and the distributor, Paramount, sold off 30% of its potential profit to an investment group because they had so little faith in the movie. They thought the movie was going to be a disaster. Well, the movie, its first weekend, didn't do very much. But its second weekend, it jumped, and its third weekend, it jumped, and it played for something like 7 months, endlessly, all around the world. Jagged Edge was the same thing. We didn't have much word of mouth. In Toronto at the film festival, it won that Best Audience Award, you know, that they give out, and we had some hope. But they put it out, and the people just went to see it. You know, the reviews were mediocre. And Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, his partner at the time, reviewed it and did a very interesting thing. They said they couldn't tell at the ending whether that really was Jeff Bridges on the floor or not. So it's possible that millions of people went to try to solve who the hell that was on the floor. You know, I'm not sure. But you don't know. You never know.